Please subscribe, it helps a lot.
The light over Haleiwa stretched thin in the early evening, painting the water in broken shades of silver and gray. Julian balanced on his board beyond the break, chest pressed low, arms loose at his sides. His muscles moved on instinct, but the joy he once carried for surfing had slipped from him months ago. Every wave felt like another drill. Every ride belonged to someone else. From the beach, his friends shouted for him to push harder. Their voices carried sharp reminders. The winter competitions were near and every session mattered. One of them called that he needed to land bigger moves if he wanted sponsors to stay interested. He gave a half-hearted wave back, though his chest tightened at the reminder. He wanted quiet. Instead, he had texts from his father pinging through his phone in the glove box of his truck. Notes about staying focused, about how prize money could cover entry fees and bills. Support sounded like orders when it came clipped and constant. Julian wondered when the ocean stopped belonging to him and became property of others. The waves that evening were clean and steady. He could ride them with ease, but the rhythm failed to spark him. His friends paddled in early, saying they wanted food before the night crowds clogged the town. Julian lingered. He told himself he needed one more wave to end the session. Secretly, he stayed because he wanted a moment without their eyes. The sun lowered behind a patch of cloud. The ocean shifted into something darker. The air cooled, and the surface rolled heavier than it had minutes before. Julian lay flat on the board, waiting, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beneath him, the water pressed upward with a weight he could feel in his stomach. A flicker of movement stirred below, vast and silent. He tensed, then forced himself to breathe slow. His mind reached for reason, maybe a turtle, maybe a school of fish. He shook it off, pulling into position when the next set approached. His arms dug through the water, shoulders straining, and then he felt the board lift. He rose quick, planting his feet, riding across the face with practiced precision. His body obeyed, though his heart lagged behind. The wave closed and he cut back into foam, spraying white arcs into the air. The performance felt hollow. As he paddled back out, the sea grew quieter, the kind of silence that swallowed the beach noise. The sky dimmed. His friends were gone now, leaving him alone with water that no longer welcomed him. He searched for another wave, but the horizon stretched flat. The pressure below surged again, stronger this time. He froze. The board shifted under him, nudged by something immense beneath the surface. He pressed his palms flat, skin prickling. A massive shadow swept under him, slow and deliberate, longer than any fishing boat he had ever seen. Julian's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to yell, but no one waited on shore, his throat locked. He dug his arms forward, trying to paddle without splashing. The surface rippled as if the sea itself breathed around him. The shape passed out of sight. For a moment, he thought it gone. He tried to convince himself it was a trick of light, but the ocean he loved never played tricks. He turned the board toward shore. His movements felt small, weak against the weight of what swam below. He counted each pull, heart racing. The water lifted him high, higher than a wave should carry. Then it broke. The shark rose without warning, an explosion of water and power. 30 feet of muscle and teeth erupted beside him. Its body gleamed dark, jaws open wide enough to swallow him whole. The impact threw him from the board. He hit the surface hard, arms flailing, lungs burning with swallowed salt. His thighs seared with sudden pain as rows of teeth grazed flesh. He kicked with every ounce of strength, striking against hide thick and unyielding. The board snapped. Foam closed around him as he fought upward, thrashing through water that felt endless. When he burst into air, the beach seemed impossibly far. He forced his limbs forward, breath tearing ragged from his chest. Behind him, the water churned again, the shark circling back. He clawed at the tide, body straining beyond exhaustion, each stroke a battle. The sand grew closer, though his vision blurred. He stumbled onto shore at last, dragging himself over wet ground, coughing salt and blood. His leg throbbed where the teeth had cut him. The horizon stayed calm, as though nothing had broken its surface. Julian collapsed onto the sand, chest heaving. The twilight sky stretched smooth above him, stars beginning to appear. His body trembled, not from cold, but from the truth he knew he had seen. No one would believe it. A shark so large did not exist here. Yet the image carved itself into him, a monster 30 feet long rising from the deep. He pressed his hand against the wound and stared at the ocean, waiting for it to prove him wrong, waiting for it to show the surface empty. The waves rolled in gentle, betraying nothing. Julian pressed his palms against wet sand, trying to steady his breath. His thigh burned, the cut deep but not fatal. The board he had relied on since spring drifted in broken halves out beyond the shore. He lay on his side for a moment, staring at the waves that looked calm, pretending nothing had torn them open minutes earlier. Shouts carried over the beach as his friends ran back toward him. Their feet pounded across sand, spray rising at their ankles. They crowded near, some laughing nervously, some shaking their heads. One reached down to help him up, saying he must have hit reef. Another pointed out the snapped board as if that explained everything. Julian tried to speak. Words caught in his throat, coming out choked and uneven. A shark. It was massive, bigger than a boat. The circle of friends exchanged glances. One let out a short laugh and said, "No shark reached 30 feet. Not here, not anywhere near shore." Another patted his shoulder, saying he must have been tired, that the light played tricks on him. The more he insisted, the more they dismissed. They guided him toward the parking lot, but none of them looked shaken. None of them looked like they believed him. When he said again that the shark was longer than the truck they were walking toward, a friend snorted and said if that were true, the entire town would be out here watching. Their words cut sharper than the wound on his leg. By the time they reached his truck, the group had shifted to talk of food. One suggested a burger place inland. Another scrolled through his phone, checking on a video he had recorded earlier. Julian stood apart, leaning against the side of his truck, blood seeping into the towel wrapped around his thigh. It was obvious he needed stitches and didn't have time for food. He hated how nonchalant they acted. He pulled his phone from the glove box and saw missed calls from his father. He called back, hands trembling, voice strained. He explained about the shark, about how large it had been. Silence followed. His father finally said accidents happened, but he could not let fear take hold now. He said to get to the ER and get stitches right away. Winter competitions were near, sponsors were waiting, bills needed covering. His father's tone stayed firm, practical. The cut would heal. No need to panic. Julian wanted to argue, but the words stalled inside him. His father's voice sharpened, saying the family depended on him keeping steady. He could not afford to fall apart. Julian stared at the wet asphalt beneath his feet until the call ended. When he looked up, his friends were already pulling away, packed into one of their cars. They waved from the window, telling him to text when he felt better, though none of them had offered to drive him to the hospital. Their laughter drifted back as the car turned out of sight. The parking lot grew quiet, the sound of waves faint behind him. Julian shifted against his truck, fighting to stay upright. His leg throbbed. He pressed harder on the towel, jaw tight. He thought of calling his mother, then stopped, knowing the conversation would circle back to money. A figure moved along the edge of the lot, stepping out from shadow. A man approached with calm strides, taller than Julian, older too, with black hair falling damp across his forehead. His eyes caught the dim light, black and steady. He carried no board, no towel, no sign he had been surfing, yet his presence carried the weight of the tide. "You're bleeding," the man said, voice low, certain. He came closer and crouched to inspect the wound. "A shark did this?" Julian's throat tightened. He nodded, relief breaking through exhaustion. "Yes, huge. No one believes me." "Are you okay?" the man said without hesitation. He tore fabric from the hem of his shirt, pressing it firmly over the cut. His hands were strong, practiced. "I believe you." Julian stared at him, unable to look away. The man introduced himself as Ben. His tone held no doubt, no trace of mockery. For the first time since he dragged himself from the water, Julian felt something ease inside him. Ben slipped an arm around him, steadying his weight. Together they moved toward a dark truck parked at the far end of the lot. Ben opened the door and guided him inside, careful with his leg. Julian sat back against the seat, still shaking, still raw from everything he had seen and everything he had been told to deny. The engine started, As the truck rolled out of the lot, Julian turned his head toward the ocean. The waves reached the shore in quiet rhythm, hiding the giant that had risen from them. His friends were gone, his father's voice still echoing in his head, but beside him sat the only person who had listened. He pressed his hand to the makeshift bandage and closed his eyes. The night stretched ahead uncertain, but for the first time since the attack, he did not feel entirely alone. Julian lay in bed with the ceiling fan spinning slow above him. His thigh ached from the stitched wound, though the doctor had assured him it would close well if he kept it clean and rested. He scrolled through messages from friends, most short, most dismissive. One said he needed to get back on the board soon or people would start talking. Another said sponsors would not wait around forever. The tone felt less like concern and more like impatience. He set the phone aside and closed his eyes. In the dark, the image of the shark returned. The length of it stretched across his memory, the jaws reaching toward him, the water splitting wide. He pressed the heel of his hand against his chest, as if he could push the vision down, but it stayed. Days passed, and each morning the same pressure returned. Coaches called to check on his progress. His father repeated the same line about focus and responsibility. His mother spoke about bills stacking up, about how the competitions could help. They wanted him back in the water before too much time slipped by. Their voices pressed in on him, steady and unyielding. Julian avoided the beach during the day. He walked the town instead, head low, hearing whispers about him. People said he looked pale, said he was shaken from a wipeout, said he was making excuses to skip practice. No one spoke about a shark. His story already sounded like a myth passed around to explain his absence. At night, he returned to the shore, drawn by the sound of waves. Ben often waited for him, sitting on the sand with his knees pulled up, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they sat in silence. On one of those nights, Julian eased down beside him, his legs stretched out, bandage hidden beneath loose fabric. The tide lapped close to their feet. "They all think I made it up," Julian said quietly. Ben did not look at him, but his voice carried certainty. "You know what you saw." The words struck deeper than any reassurance Julian had heard in weeks. He wanted to lean into them, to hold on to the steadiness Ben gave. "Why do you believe me?" Julian asked. His tone carried suspicion and gratitude mixed together. "Because the ocean holds more than people admit," Ben replied. "I've seen enough to know when someone speaks truth." Julian turned his head, studying him in the pale light. Ben's expression gave nothing away, yet the conviction in his tone left no room for doubt. Their nights together grew longer. Ben guided him into the shallows, showing him how to breathe steady when the water touched his waist. Julian resisted at first, but Ben's hand on his arm kept him from fleeing. They stood until Julian's heartbeat slowed. He told himself it was practice, a way to return to the water, though part of him recognized something else forming between them. He caught himself watching the lines of Ben's shoulders, the way his hair clung wet against his skin, the calm that seemed to radiate from him. Attraction stirred quietly, filling spaces Julian thought were too fractured to hold anything new. He tried to push it aside, afraid of its weight, but it lingered. The more time he spent with Ben, the less he saw of his friends. Invitations to train stopped coming. Messages turned cold. A coach reminded him that winter season did not wait for anyone. His father's voice grew sharper, warning him not to waste years of work. Julian knew their concerns carried reason, but every word felt like a wall pressing him toward something he no longer wanted. He thought about the joy he once felt on the waves, how it slipped away the moment surfing became duty. He wondered if he even wanted to chase titles anymore. One evening he tried to tell Ben about the pressure. "They think I'm weak," Julian said. "They think I'm scared." "Maybe I am. Maybe I can't go back." Ben placed a hand over his, steady and warm. "Fear speaks louder when no one listens to you. But you are not weak." The touch lingered. Julian did not pull away. His chest ached with something heavier than fear, something he could not name yet. He felt the divide between what others demanded and what he desired growing sharper. When he returned home that night, he scrolled through another string of messages. A friend wrote that if he wanted to keep his spot, He needed to stop hiding. Another wrote that people were already betting he would drop out. Julian shut the screen off, his reflection faint against black glass. The memory of Ben's hand stayed with him, grounding him in a way no call or text ever did. He stretched out on his bed, the sound of waves still in his ears, and realized he wanted to see Ben again more than he wanted to see anyone else. Julian's mornings grew quiet. He no longer woke for training runs. His board leaned against the wall, waxed but untouched. Calls from his coach went unanswered. He left messages from sponsors unopened. The weight of expectation pressed harder with each day he avoided the water, yet his body resisted. Whispers grew in town. At the store, he heard two boys laugh about him losing his nerve. At a cafe, an older surfer shook his head and told another that Julian's career might be over before it began. The words followed him, clinging long after he left each place. He tried to ignore them, but shame lodged in his chest. At home, his father showed up unannounced one afternoon. He sat across the table with arms folded, face set in a way Julian knew too well. "You can't keep wasting time," his father said. "The season doesn't wait. People are watching. Sponsors are already looking elsewhere. You need to prove you still belong out there." Julian pressed his palms against his knees, struggling to answer. The memory of the shark filled his throat before he could form words. His father cut him off. "You're stronger than this. If you let fear decide, everything you've worked for disappears. Our family depends on you." Staying in the conversation ended with silence, his father leaving without another word. The door closing behind him felt heavier than any wave Julian had faced. That night he walked the beach with his head low, sand cool beneath his feet. Ben sat near the waterline, waiting as he always did. When Julian reached him, he lowered himself beside him, the air between them thick with things unsaid. "They won't listen," Julian whispered. "They don't want the truth. They want me back on a board. Nothing else." Ben turned his head, eyes fixed on him. "The truth isn't for them. It's for you." Julian let the words sink in. He stared at the tide, the foam curling in and pulling back. He wanted to believe it, but doubt gnawed at him. "If I don't compete, I lose everything. If I go back, I lose myself." Ben reached out, his hand resting over Julian's wrist. The touch steadied him. "You're more than their plans for you." Julian leaned into the contact, heat rising under his skin. He closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment where no voices demanded anything, no eyes judged his choices. He breathed, and for the first time that day, his chest eased. The nights that followed carried the same rhythm. They met by the shore, speaking in low tones. Sometimes they swam in the shallows, Ben guiding him farther than he thought possible. Each time Julian's fear sparked, then dulled under Ben's presence. He began to feel the water differently, not as threat, but as something alive that could still hold him without harm. Their closeness deepened in small ways. A hand resting longer than necessary. A glance held across silence. A smile breaking when words failed. Julian felt the pull grow stronger each time, though part of him feared it, unsure what it meant or where it would lead. One evening after they walked into the tide up to their waists, Julian asked, "How do you swim like that? You go farther than anyone I've ever seen. You never look tired." Ben's gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "Some things are easier to show than explain," he said softly. His voice held a weight Julian could not name. Julian studied him in the fading light. The answer stirred more unease than comfort, but he kept silent. Something in Ben's eyes stopped him from pressing further. Later that week, one of his old friends caught him outside a cafe. The boy smirked, saying if Julian wanted to save face, he should get over his fear fast. "If there even was a shark," the friend muttered, "maybe you wanted the attention." The words landed like a strike. Julian said nothing and walked away, shame burning inside him. That night he told Ben about it, voice raw. Ben listened without interruption. When Julian's voice broke, Ben pulled him close. Julian let himself be held, the world narrowing to the steady rhythm of Ben's breathing. His chest ached, not from fear this time, but from something heavier that pressed to the surface. The divide between the life everyone demanded and the one he felt with Ben grew sharper with each day. Julian knew he could not stand in both. The ocean still waited, but it no longer belonged to competitions or trophies. It belonged to the scar on his thigh, the fear no one else believed, and the quiet bond that drew him to Ben night after night. The tension around Julian reached a breaking point. His coach stopped calling and instead sent a short message through his father. If Julian did not enter the winter competition, another surfer would replace him permanently. His mother's voice grew sharp, urging him to think of the family, to think of the sacrifices they made for his training. His father spoke less but looked at him with a silence that said more than words. Julian withdrew further, finding his only refuge in the night. Ben remained constant, waiting for him near the tide. Their walks stretched longer, their conversations deeper, yet the air around Ben carried an edge Julian could no longer ignore. He sensed something unspoken waiting between them. One night the moon lit the water in pale silver. They walked into the shallows, waves circling their legs. Julian's skin prickled with unease, though he forced himself forward. He turned to Ben. "I need you to tell me why you believe me when no one else does." Ben stilled, his gaze fixed on the horizon again, shoulders tense. "Because I know the truth of what happened that night." Julian's chest tightened. "You weren't there." No one was. Ben's eyes locked on him, dark and unblinking. "I was closer than you think." The air shifted. Julian's pulse quickened, fear and longing twisted together. "What are you saying?" Ben stepped nearer, water swirling higher against their bodies. "The shark you saw wasn't a dream, and it wasn't your imagination. It was real. Too real for anyone to accept." Julian swallowed hard. "It tried to kill me." Ben's face held grief. "It was my brother." The word struck Julian like a wave crashing into his chest. He staggered, the tide pulling at his legs. "Your brother?" His voice broke, anger cutting through the fear. "You're telling me the shark that tore into me, that ruined everything, was your brother?" Ben reached for him, but Julian pulled back. "You should have told me," Julian said, breath uneven. "I wanted to," Ben said. His voice carried pain, thick and rough. "But I knew if you heard it too soon you would never let me close. You would see me as danger, not as someone who cared for you." Julian stared at him, searching his face. In that moment, the closeness they had built pressed against the raw wound inside him. He remembered the scar on his thigh, the way his father's voice hardened, the shame his friends threw at him. Now Ben stood before him, not only a comfort, but tied to the very terror that shattered his life. "You mean you're like him?" Julian whispered. His words trembled. Ben nodded slowly. "I am. I am not only what you see now. I can take his shape, though I've fought to live apart from it. My brother could not resist the pull of blood. He saw you and forgot restraint." Julian's stomach turned, fear crawling beneath his skin. He wanted to run, but his body stayed rooted. He wanted to shout, but no sound came. His mind spun with images of teeth, of the endless dark water, of Ben's hand steadying his wrist. Ben's voice softened. "I have never hurt you. Every night I've tried to help you heal. You feel it too. You know I've kept you safe." Julian's eyes stung. "Safe? My life is broken. I can't compete. My family sees me as weak. My friends think I'm lying. And now you're telling me you're part of it. How can I ever feel safe?" Ben's expression wavered. He stepped closer again, not touching, but near enough Julian felt the heat of him. "Because I love you. That's the truth I've held back, more than anything else. I love you, and I would never let harm reach you again." The confession tore through the night. Julian's breath shook. He wanted to believe, wanted to lean into the warmth that had been his only light through weeks of isolation. Yet the memory of his wound pulsed, fresh and raw. He pulled up his short leg, letting moonlight touch the scar. "This is what your brother gave me. You can't erase it. No love can erase it." Ben's eyes shone with sorrow. "I can't erase it. But I can stand with you as you carry it. You don't need to walk through this alone." Silence stretched. The waves lapped around them, steady, indifferent. Julian's heart battled itself, pulled between the comfort of Ben's arms and the horror of the truth that bound them. He turned away, staring at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. For the first time, he saw it not as a promise of glory, but as an endless weight. He thought of his family, of his coach, of his friends. He thought of Ben, standing beside him, marked by the same water that had nearly ended his life. Julian whispered, "If I let you stay near me, everything changes." Ben's voice, low and certain, answered, "Everything already has." The days after Ben's confession stretched into a blur. Julian woke each morning with his heart heavy, his leg aching as if the scar had grown deeper. He walked through town with lowered eyes, avoiding familiar faces. When his phone buzzed with another message from his coach, he turned it off and tossed it onto his bed. His parents gave up pressing him, their voices dulled by disappointment. The silence between them stung worse than any argument. At night, he still found himself walking to the beach. He tried staying away once, sitting in his room with the fan humming, but the pull in his chest grew unbearable. The tide called to him, and so did Ben. When he arrived, Ben was already there, standing at the edge of the water. The sight of him lit both fear and longing inside Julian. He stepped closer, unsure what words could carry the weight of what he felt. Ben spoke first. "You haven't been sleeping." Julian gave a short nod. "Neither have you." They walked along the shore, waves licking at their ankles. The moon hung low, the stars sharp in the dark sky. Julian felt the air pressing on him, demanding an answer he had not yet found. Finally, he stopped and turned to Ben. "You say you love me," Julian said, voice raw. "But your world gave me this." He pointed to his scar, his throat tightening. "How can love grow out of that?" Ben's face twisted with sorrow. "My brother's hunger marked you, not my love. I have carried his mistake every day since. If you want me gone, I will leave, but I will not deny what I feel." Julian searched his eyes. The words struck something tender in him, though anger still lingered. "If I walk away from surfing, if I walk away from everything they wanted me to be, what do I have left?" Ben stepped closer, the water curling around them. "You have yourself. You have choice. You don't have to walk away. It's a choice. And I'm sorry you have to make it." The silence between them thickened. Julian thought of the years of training, the sweat, the exhaustion, the pressure from his father, the weight of a career that no longer felt like his own. He thought of the endless ocean, both a place of fear and the place where Ben's voice steadied him. Tears stung his eyes. "I don't know how to live without surfing. But I don't want to live in fear of it either. I want it back, not for trophies, not for them." "For me," Ben's gaze softened. "Then take it back on your terms. Not theirs." Julian felt his chest tremble, the words breaking something open inside him. He stepped into Ben's arms, resting his head against his chest. The warmth, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solidity of his embrace anchored him in a way nothing else had. "I want you to stay," Julian whispered. "Even if everything feels broken, even if I can't see the end." Ben held him tighter. "Then I'll stay. I'll stand with you, no matter what waits." The tide surged higher around them, cool against their skin, as if the ocean itself listened. Julian closed his eyes, letting the moment root him. For the first time since the attack, he felt more than fear. He felt the faint spark of freedom. The following morning, he walked past his board again, but this time he stopped. He touched the wax, fingers tracing the familiar surface. He carried it outside, setting it on the sand. His body trembled, but he pushed into the water. Each stroke fought against the memory of teeth and blood, but with each movement forward he reclaimed a piece of himself. Ben swam beside him, silent, his presence steady. They reached the break together. Julian sat straddling his board, waves rolling beneath him. The horizon stretched wide, endless yet no longer unbearable. He breathed deeply, salt air filling his lungs. He knew he would never return to the competitions, never fit into the image his parents or coach demanded. That future had collapsed the moment the shark struck. Yet in the ruin, something else waited, a path shaped not by others but by his own will. Julian turned to Ben. Their eyes met, the truth between them no longer hidden. Pain still lived inside him, but so did the pull of love. He let the tide rock him, scar burning faintly against his thigh, and allowed himself to believe in a life that could belong to him, scar and all.
Please make sure you are subscribed and be one of the strange.